Imagine hijacking a plane, stealing $200,000, jumping into the darkness from 10,000 feet, and never being seen again. Just take a second to process that. Nobody ever found, no arrest ever made, and absolutely no answers.
Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are unpacking a true American legend, the mystery of D.B. Cooper. It's been over 50 years since that cold November night, and yet this remains one of the most fascinating and downright baffling unsolved crimes in history. I mean, how does a man simply vanish into thin air? Well, we're going to look closely at the facts we have, trace his steps, explore exactly how this incredible vanishing act happened, and understand why this single event changed aviation security forever.
Section 1, Boarding Flight 305, November 24th, 1971. Okay, let's dive into this. Picture a remarkably unremarkable man, using the name Dan Cooper, quietly boarding a totally standard commuter flight to Seattle. Section 2, the midair heist, a calculated plan. Because shortly after takeoff, the illusion of a normal, boring flight completely shatters. Now, Cooper wasn't acting erratic. He was actually highly methodical. He calmly handed a note to the flight attendant with 3 very specific demands. First, he wanted exactly $200,000 in ransom money. Second, he demanded 4 parachutes, and this was a brilliant psychological move, right? Because it made authorities wonder if he was going to take hostages out the door with him, which essentially forced them to make absolutely sure the parachutes were fully functional. And finally, he demanded that the flight be redirected south toward Mexico. So the crucial point to look at here is this specific ransom. It is vital to pause and put that amount into perspective. Back in 1971, $200,000 was an absolute fortune. We are talking the equivalent of over $1.5 million today. This wasn't some petty theft. It was a massive, incredibly bold extortion plot happening literally miles above the ground. The authorities knew they had to take him seriously, and they immediately started scrambling to gather the cash to save the passengers on board. Let's walk through exactly how this audacious heist unfolded. On November 24th, he boards the flight in Portland. During the flight, he makes his move, handing over the bomb note. The plane lands in Seattle, and here the authorities comply. They deliver the massive bag of cash and the 4 parachutes. Keeping his word, Cooper actually releases the civilian passengers. But the crisis isn't over. He keeps part of the flight crew on board as hostages. Hours later, back in the air and heading toward Mexico, Cooper does the unthinkable. He forces the crew to lower the rear stairs of the Boeing 727 mid-flight, and he just steps out into the void. Which brings us to the terrifying climax of the physical heist. Imagine the sensory details of this moment. He is miles high, somewhere over the vast, rugged, completely freezing dark forests of the Pacific Northwest. He opens those rear stairs, feels the roaring wind of the jet engines, and parachutes into a pitch-black night with a heavy bag of ransom money strapped to him. From that exact second onward, Dan Cooper was never seen again. He simply allowed the darkness to swallow him whole. Section 3, the massive investigation, searching for a ghost. The terrifying hostage crisis was finally over, but the agonizing ground search was really just beginning. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer frustration of the entire case. The FBI launched one of the most extensive, resource-heavy investigations in its history. They interviewed hundreds of suspects. They followed thousands of individual leads all across the country. And yet, the physical evidence was virtually non-existent. No one could ever prove who he really was. There was no body found in the dense woods. No parachute was immediately recovered. It wasn't until 1980, almost a full decade later, that a tiny sliver of physical evidence even emerged when a small portion of the decaying ransom money was found buried near a riverbank. Section 4, the enduring mystery. What really happened? Because finding that decaying money in 1980 didn't close the case at all. It just deepened the puzzle. For half a century, investigators and amateur sleuths have been completely divided by 2 dueling theories. The first is a matter of logic and harsh reality. He died during the jump. The weather was brutal, the Pacific Northwest wilderness is unbelievably unforgiving, and the drop itself was incredibly dangerous. It's highly probable the elements just claimed him. But the second theory suggests the ultimate mastermind. He survived. He navigated the drop, escaped the massive dragnet with his newly acquired fortune, and lived out the rest of his days under a completely new identity, just laughing at the authorities. Because there's no body, and because the FBI ultimately failed to close the case, despite their massive, decades-long effort, the legend lives on. The sheer lack of finality is exactly why, even today, more than 50 years later, fresh theories are still being formulated and new suspects are continually brought forward by folks obsessed with the case. The book is simply not closed. Which brings us to one final lingering question. We've looked at his audacious plan, his incredible leap into the dark, and the massive, totally fruitless search that followed. So, what do you think? Did D.B. Cooper meet his end in the freezing wilderness that night, a victim of his own ambition? Or did he pull off the absolute greatest escape in American history? I would love to hear how you interpret the facts we've covered in this explainer today. Let us know your theory in the comments, and keep questioning the unknown.